Hello, welcome. I want to talk today about self-worth because here's the kind of interesting thing in an abusive relationship. So many people will assume that the victim of abuse has low self-worth and has always had self-worth that sucks and it's your fault because if you just had more self-worth you would never have been in an abusive relationship, that's somehow like the defense or the shield. If you have enough, then it won't happen to you, and this assumption that we just all had low or no self-worth. It's actually a really common misconception that is not true, rooted in a myth. And I think Sandra L. Brown has done some really interesting research on this, because where does that myth even really come from? And I'm sure there's a lot of places, but one of them that is really widely spread is that victims of abuse who are coming out of domestic violence shelters were interviewed in sort of, call it an anecdotal way, not a study, not an official study, and they self-reported that they had low self-worth. And you have to imagine that this is a group of women like at the worst time of their life, at the most down, broken down, awful time of their life, are self-reporting that they have low self-worth, but that actually doesn't speak to the different types of victims that there are. Some are wealthy, some are not, some are educated, some are not, some have low self-worth, some do not. And that's kind of the point, is that we all think that there's things we can do or be that would prevent us from being in an abusive relationship, and it's really just not true. Now, self-worth is kind of the foundation that's needed for healing. And let's be honest, when you're in an abusive relationship, yeah, you get beaten down to not have self-worth because they really just pick away at you, right? They make it so impossible to actually feel good about yourself. In the beginning of these relationships, they start so amazingly, right? They start giving you compliments and they know you, they see you, you feel loved, you feel worthy, and it gets slowly taken away, but they oscillate usually between, let's call it, good and bad behavior. So there's cruelty and kindness happening at the same time, and it goes back and forth. If a relationship went from amazing to awful, and it was awful all the time, you'd leave. We would all leave. What makes these abusive relationships so successful for the abuser is that you get confused and you get attached. But what creates the attachment is the oscillation between kindness and cruelty, because you're always keeping it on your toes. You're always on eggshells. You're always not sure. But they use a lot of tactics really to just break you down. Self-worth matters. And I feel like, self-worth is kind of that quiet knowing your value and knowing that you don't deserve to be treated this way. I often think back to when I was coming out of my abusive relationship. If you had asked me, even when I was in it, do you have self-worth? I would have been like, yeah, I sure do. I would have said I love myself. I would have said all those things. But how was I showing up for myself, particularly in my home life? Because I probably appeared confident and all the things outwardly in my job, in my friendships, in my family relationships, but not in my home life, not in my romantic partnership. I think that, we enter abusive relationships with varying levels of self-esteem. I think that my self-esteem, which is not the same thing as self-worth, but it was maybe not where it needed to be when I first got into the relationship, but it was certainly better than when I left, right? When you leave, you feel like, because abusive relationships systematically break you down over time and lower your self-worth over time. It just breaks you. Someone in the comments is just asking a question. Is it possible to break a trauma bond on your own? Did I make it on my own? Absolutely not. It is possible. I didn't do it on my own. I did it with the help of a professional. And I recommend that for people that are able, because doing it on your own is very challenging. Now, I do have a self-guided course that's really affordable. It's only $97 and you can do a payment plan even, but it's called the Trauma Bond Recovery Course, because at least then you have the path. Because when people say break it on your own, what does that mean? Just hope that it breaks. What are the steps? What are the things that you need to learn? So the Trauma Bond Recovery Course gives you a guide and a path in a really affordable way if you can't afford to work with me or someone else on an ongoing basis. So yes, it's possible. It's harder, but it's possible. And I It's why I created the course, in all honesty, because I absolutely know that people can do that. There is a conditioning that happens in these abusive relationships, and a part of that is what lowers your self-worth. Self-worth, confidence, self-esteem, people get them all kind of jumbled, and this isn't really going to be like a here's all the definitions type of thing, but confidence is like what you do. Do you know what I mean? It's how you show up in the world. It's your skills, your achievements, your abilities. But self-worth is who you are. It's your right to exist in the world, your right to take up space and to have what you want in your life and have your needs met. It's the belief that you know that these things are true, and you matter because you're human, right? Not because you perform. And that's the key, because abusive relationships, it's like you're only worthy if you are performing or serving or doing or giving and being compliant or submissive or whatever. You have to be doing something. Well, that's not actual, true, lasting self-worth if that's what you're doing. I think that people who have the best self-worth know that if you make a mistake, that's okay. And you're not worried about what people will think of you. You just know that you have it. And you know that your value is not going to change based on somebody else's opinion of you, because that's what abusers do, right? They sort of like constantly make you feel like you're not good enough. And that really eats away at any person. You know, so many people think, again, like you have great self-worth, it's not going to work on you. I hate to break it to you. That level of, I honestly, I've tried to come up with like a better word, but I honestly think this is the most accurate word, is that arrogance that some people have of like, that could never be me. It could be you. And I actually think that the arrogance is often what makes it that person. The amount of people that say it who are like, no, I would never let a man treat me like that. I said the same thing. Now, I wasn't running around saying it publicly and shaming people. I feel like that's the difference. I might have felt it. I think that I felt like there are women who don't have self-worth and get abused, and then there's women that do, that would leave. Well, I felt that I had self-worth and I didn't leave, which almost really does prove that it's not directly tied to self-worth. That's not the only thing. I think something I've learned from many people, Joe Navarro, a former FBI agent, Mark Wynn, a former law enforcement officer, Dr. Peter Salerno, Dr. Carrie McAvoy, geez, so many people, to say that what we're missing, in fact, Chuck Derry, the founder of the Gender Violence Institute as well, all of these professionals and so many more have said the biggest issue that victims have and what leads us into these relationships is actually that you don't know that people like this exist. That there are people that are predatory and exploitative, manipulative and abusive, and they do these things because they can. Not because you did anything, not because you have low self-worth, not because you are a target, not because you let them, not because you picked them. It's because they can, because they think they deserve it. It's really that simple. So many people that I talk to are like, honestly, I had no idea that people like this exist. And actually, someone in the comments is asking, what can I do to prevent getting into an abusive relationship? And self-worth is going to help you. I'm just saying that it isn't the be-all, end-all. I think number one is the knowledge that people exist like that. Because when you sort of, let's take a step back. You start dating someone and maybe, you know, something small happens and you're sort of like, that was a little bit off, but whatever. The but whatever part, what makes us just sort of rationalize the bad thing, right? Obviously, if it's like screaming at you on the third date or something, maybe that's more alarming, but it doesn't start that way. It's something small. It's a mood. He snapped at you. It's a small things that end up happening either to us or to other people that we witness and we see, and we tell ourselves something. It's a bad day. It's trauma. It's, oh, maybe this person is just a bad person. That's never on the list. I'm not saying that they are one. I'm saying that we are sort of like, maybe it's A or B or C. It's trauma. It's his mom. It's his ex. Instead of maybe it's just a choice that this person makes. Knowing that people are out there that are just predatory. 1 in 5 people are predatory. That's a big number. That is a big number. It's wild. And ultimately, it's hard to know And the truth is, you are going to meet people that are not nice, not good in your life. And all I'm saying is, if you feel uncomfortable, and this takes some work to actually go like, this doesn't feel right. There's something off about this. When I think back to when I should have ended that relationship, we were like 3 months in. But to me, it was like, he's so great in all these other ways. So he screamed at me on my birthday, and it made sense to me. I'm not saying it was okay. I wasn't like, oh, that's fine, it's no big deal. I'm just saying that, his grandfather had died 3 days before, and he was very stressed out helping plan a party for me, and he snapped and he yelled at me, and it was a high stress situation. No, a man screamed at me on my birthday that I had only been dating for 3 months. But why did I go, well, but this and that and maybe this? And I get it, right? Like, maybe he was really stressed. I'm not saying the feelings that he was experiencing weren't real. I'm saying, why was that an excuse? Why didn't I say, actually, there's no reason, because if you're stressed out, you need to regulate. You need to take a minute for yourself. You need to know how to handle yourself. But I was like, oh, it's fine, I'll forgive. Should never have forgiven that. Never. And thinking back, he didn't even apologize, right? So like, you think back and it's like, oh, she should have known. I would never let a man scream at me on my birthday. We all would say that. I would have said the exact same thing, but it's like, you're in it, and then the decisions get harder because everything else about this person is usually amazing, and it's like the one thing. So you're really going to end something that could be amazing because of one thing, and society pushes that at you. Do you see how everything I'm talking about right now has nothing to do with self-esteem? It's actually about noticing how deep that is actually a red flag or not for you. But we make these rationalizations. That's not directly tied to self-esteem. It really isn't. Having said that, self-esteem is going to help you say to yourself, I don't deserve that. Let's not pretend that's not true, right? It's you do need to say to yourself and show yourself by action that you don't deserve that, by saying, you can't speak to me that way. Now, I didn't say that specifically, but he was clear that I felt he was feeling remorse. Undoubtedly he wasn't, but that's what I thought. And so you make that first exception to like, okay, I'm going to let that slide because your grandpa died, and I'm going to let that slide because you were really busy and you were doing something nice for me. But it was like, okay, but it happened again, right? And like the pattern. So again, you don't have to end it the minute you see one bad thing. But I'm like, people call them like red flags and pink flags. And I just take the flag, put it in your pocket, and think about, is this a pattern? You don't have to end things like right off the bat, but slow down a little bit. Now, self-worth is fundamentally shaped in childhood. That's really where it comes from. If you've been raised in an environment where you get consistent love and you feel safe and you feel secure, that is going to build self-worth. If you are listened to, right? If your parents are like, don't talk to me, and like, neglectful or inconsistent, some of these things can shape your self-worth. Nobody has perfect parents, right? But your voice matters. Your needs are valid. You don't lose love when you fail, right? If you get like a C or a D or an F on homework or something, is it like, are you in trouble? Are you being punished? These are things that are signs, but I know that it's hard. But if love is conditional, if you're neglected, if it's inconsistent, if your needs are ignored, if you are ridiculed, if your parents withdraw, if you have emotionally immature parents, I'm telling you, kids learn like, I only matter when I perform. I only matter when I'm earning love and earning that I matter. I'm only lovable when I'm useful. I'm only lovable when I'm quiet. These things really destroy your self-worth. You have to learn that you're amazing. And I'm not going to make this about parenting, but for those that have children, I learned this really great shift that I love to talk to people about very quickly, which is, if you think about like a child, and I have a 7 and a 9-year-old, come home and like they drew a picture, or, my daughter got a baseball medal. You must be so proud of yourself instead of, I'm so proud of you, because it's not really my pride that my children should be earning. They should feel proud of themselves. You must be so proud of yourself. Or like Good job. Instead of good job, say, wow, I can see that you worked really hard on that. Look, it paid off. You're giving them the confidence and the self-worth. This is the building blocks. This is a very simple example, but if you think, and you're not a parent, even think back to how you were parented as a child. Were you told you must be so proud of yourself? Or did you feel like you had to earn it? Like, mommy, look at my A. Look, I got an A. Aren't you proud of me? You don't want somebody to be, asking how you feel. That is already building the external validation needs, which again, it's normal to want your parents' validation and approval. I'm not saying you don't need it. I'm saying you should need yours more. You should need yours more. So if you're a parent, try to put that into your life. And if you're not a parent, just think about how this has shaped who you are and your view of yourself and your self-worth, because that really matters. When you're in a sort of, let's call it a conditional environment or an unsafe environment, that's difficult to be raised there and walk out of it with self-worth. You have to learn it. I think inherently children are kind of born with self-worth. Like we think children, if you know this, right? Children think the whole world revolves around them, but the behavior of the caregivers and the adults around them shapes this, and it can be taken away from them. And then look at all of us, right? Who are struggling with rebuilding this type of feeling in ourselves. But when you're in this abusive relationship, right? Abusers will criticize, they will gaslight, they will compare, they will use triangulation, they withhold affection, they withhold approval, their validation, they use shaming, they blame you, mock, belittle, devalue. All of this is to remove your dignity. This is why they do things like dog whistle, right? And they'll, let's say, an example that I use a lot is, let's say you don't have a college or university degree, and it's something that you are particularly sensitive about. You started and you never finished, and it was like your one big life regret. This person, if they're narcissistic and they're using this dog whistle tactic, they'll be like, you're just not educated. You must not understand because you don't have a degree like I do. And then you'll be out somewhere and they'll be like bragging on someone else's degree or bringing up something about degrees or education in front of you, bragging about someone else, and you're sitting there like, we were just talking about my not having a degree. Why are you complimenting someone else's? Or like housekeeping, right? Like, you're just not a very good housekeeper. It just is what it is. That's a private argument. But then you go to a friend's house and it's like, wow, Stacy, your house is so clean. Lisa, do you see how clean Stacy's house is? Wow, you're such a good housewife. But that point is to make you feel bad without making it clear to others that you feel bad, right? So, and if you bring it up, it's like, what? He's just complimenting someone else. What's the big deal? These are the ways that they just chip away at you. Subtle digs. My ex used to say to me all the time, like, well, you're just not that likable. Like, some people like you, but not everybody. And I get it. You're an acquired taste. Who says that to someone? But abusers. It's just this way to sort of make you question yourself. Gaslighting is a huge part of this, right? Because you doubt your own reality. So how can you think you are worthy and know yourself and validate yourself and feel convicted in who you are and what your perceptions of the world are when somebody's like, you sure about that? You sure about that? It really just destroys you. So I teach self-worth and rebuilding after abuse in a couple of different ways. I have one-on-one coaching. People can work with me privately. I also have a group coaching program that I host a couple of times a year. The next program is on September 23rd. It's called Rise and Rebuild. And this is a 12-week group coaching program. And I co-host it with Dr. Peter Salerno, who is an amazing retired clinical researcher and therapist. He's an expert in cluster B disorders and an author of 2 amazing books. Please check him out at drpetersalerno.com. But to register for Rise and Rebuild, you can go to the link in my bio or strongerthanbefore.ca and click on group coaching. But it's so key to learn this, and learning it in a group setting with other women who are experiencing the same thing, or learning it privately one-on-one with me or with your therapist. It's really key to learn how to rebuild yourself. And it's really going to be huge in your growth. I used to feel like it was impossible. You may have heard me say so many times before, I used to be like, nobody really loves themselves. I never believed it. But the truth is, Everyone can build it. It is absolutely within your reach to rebuild or build for the first time having self-worth. I used to think it was impossible because it felt like this big, huge, heavy thing that, how can anybody know how to do this? This is crazy. It's not, I don't want to say it's easy, don't get me wrong. It's constant active choices that you make every day, but it's action, right? It's not like, oh, here's the book you need to really do it. The reason why, you're not just going to like learn the whole thing in a book. There's great books on it. In fact, I've moved recently, so I don't have all my books with me, but there's one called The Self-Love Workbook. The author's name is Ali. Her last name is Ali. She's a doctor. Her first name escapes me right now, but phenomenal book. It's pink and purple on the cover. I've written a great journal called Rebuilding After a Trauma Bond, a self-love journal, which is the link in my profile, and you can get it on Amazon, anywhere. But great books. But the truth is, I teach it in one-on-one coaching and in group coaching because it is action-based and conversation-based. And what can you actually use in your day-to-day life? What can you do tomorrow to take one step towards it? And often it's choosing yourself. I do think that's the author. I don't know how to pronounce that. Shayna, right? Shayna Ali. I think that's her, the author of that book, A Self-Love Workbook. But it's difficult to know where to begin. And I feel like that's the piece of so many people say like, okay, well, what do I do? Like starting tomorrow, what do I do tomorrow? What's the action that I can take? And I feel like that's the kind of coach that I am. It's not all theory. It's like, okay, so tomorrow I want you to do this. I want you to choose yourself. These are small things of, your boss gives you too many projects because you're amazing and you always get it done. Say no. If you're overextended, like that's self-worth. Knowing that I am a person who values a balanced life. Interestingly, I never used to be a person who valued balanced life. Before I had kids, I'll work all day long, right? I'll work into the evening. It doesn't matter. When I had kids, I'm like, okay, my priorities have changed. So I can't do that anymore. So when somebody gives you an extra project and you're thinking, okay, I'll just work late tonight. That was the old me. I can't anymore. So I value a balance. I want to do well at my job and I want to, I work for myself now, but, how can I balance these things? What are my values? Well, I don't feel guilty. I don't feel like I have to perform for anybody because I have learned self-worth. I don't perform for men. I don't perform for work. I don't perform. I am who I am, take it or leave it. And I aim to be a good person and I know what my core values are and how I show up and I know what my boundaries are, but it's all because I have developed self-worth that I didn't used to have, right? So I certainly wasn't feeling this way my whole life, let me tell you. But when you have when you're in a bad relationship, toxic, abusive, unhealthy relationship, you might stay in a situation that really dishonors your values and you think that maybe it's the best you'll get, right? And these abusive guys will always be like, nobody's ever going to want you, right? You're lucky that I put up with you. You're lucky. And that they really feed that narrative because they don't want you to leave. They don't want you to leave them because they benefit from you staying. And it's such a wild paradox because they're trying to keep you because you're amazing, but they're trying to keep you through telling you that you're not amazing and that you'll never leave. But that's the point. Break you down so that they can keep you. But why would they want to keep you if you were so awful? Partially because of control. It's not always that they think so highly of you. They do want to break you for the purposes of power and control, like I promise you. People who are experiencing low self-worth tend to over-explain themselves. You shrink yourself because you don't want to be a burden to other people. And I really get that one. You overgive, right? You're the friend that's like, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, me. You need help? Sure. And you completely overextend yourself in life because you feel like giving to other people is how you get friendships and love. But that's not something that is lasting and authentic, but it's a habit. Now, it's easy to say, build self-worth. I think one of the key things, and I said this in a video that I did yesterday on YouTube, I really feel like one of our biggest blocks is that it's easy to say, set boundaries and have more self-worth and say no. But the part that we're not addressing, which we do actually address in my group coaching program, Rise and Rebuild, was like, what are the impediments to that? Okay, just say no. And it's easy to say that, but what happens? What's the feeling that comes up? Say no. Well, my boss isn't going to think that they can rely on me anymore, or my husband's going to scream at me, right? Let's put this back into the context of an abusive relationship. You might be punished, screamed at, abandoned, rejected, mocked, belittled, criticized, right? And that's your consequence for having worth and for trying to set a boundary. So easy to say, but you actually have to address what's the issue that actually stops you from that. So if you feel like you're going to be rejected because you're standing up for yourself, you're not going to stand up for yourself. But where you are building self-worth, you are like, well, if I get rejected by some person who doesn't like me having boundaries, that's their problem. Then you are more capable. This is why rebuilding is really hard, because there's a lot of moving pieces and there's a lot of things that like, do this, but what makes that hard is one step back. I'm a fan of kind of like, let's work backwards here and figure out what's the root, what's making this all so difficult for you. And it's not just you don't have enough self-worth. It's a lot deeper than that. And the consequences and the fears that we have, the punishments, like it's so hard to just have more self-worth. There you go. You don't even need to learn anything. There you go. Just have more self-worth. So many people say that, and it oversimplifies it. I think it's one of the biggest lies of abuse is that you need more, go get it, as if you can find it quickly and you'll be all set. Abuse actually teaches you that you only have value when you are performing. And this is conditioning. This isn't just like you read it somewhere and it just filtered into your brain. This is usually years of conditioning, and often conditioning from childhood into adulthood. So the conditioning isn't always one person. Sometimes it's your parents, your siblings, a boss, a teacher that you remember from grade 9, and a university professor, 2 friends, and your ex-husband. So when it's so many people and it's been the pattern and it just feels so true, you just aren't worthy. You just aren't. And if you believe that, because I feel like there's many groups of people, I don't want to categorize people too deeply here, but those that like think they have self-worth but kind of don't, and then some that are like, no, I have no self-worth. Like I really don't. I don't think I deserve better than this. I'm scared that if he leaves, I'm never going to find someone. I believe the things that he says. My mom used to say I'm really difficult, and he says I'm really difficult, so it's obviously true. But these are people who are not saying kind things about you. And I always want to sort of push back of like, why are we listening to people who only have bad things to say? The people around you become your mirror. And that's really important to know, that when you are standing here and you have these reflections of people who don't think highly of you, it will become your own opinion of yourself. So we need to get rid of those people that make us feel bad and really start to hold up a mirror for ourselves and reflect back to ourselves, I am worthy. Affirmations can be great. Some people feel silly doing them. I completely get it. They do work. I think a little trick in affirmations is saying things that feel true. So like an example would be, I feel strong. And let's say you absolutely don't. You feel weak, shattered, and destroyed. And you're there in the mirror going, I am strong. I am strong. And you don't feel strong at all. You're lying to yourself, right? And I think that your brain really registers that as a lie. So what you want to do is think back to your life at any point and think, when did I feel strong? I did go through this one thing and I survived it. So that's strength. But that was just then. Okay, so think of that moment and then look in the mirror and say, I am strong. And replay that strength from that moment in your life or moments. Think about that. And that's just, I am strong. You can do this with whichever ones. But I always felt like they felt really inauthentic. And actually, I know people that feel completely differently than what I just said about your brain registering it as a lie, and like words have power, and if you just repeat it, it'll eventually become true. But I don't know how long you're going to repeat something that doesn't feel true. You might give up and feel defeated, and someone in the comment section is saying it makes her feel worse, so I get that. And it just didn't work for me. until I started to use it in a way that was like, okay, let me try to recall when I felt strong, when I felt beautiful, when I felt worthy in certain moments. And I used that. I will also say that affirmations don't work for everybody. So if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. And affirmations is not necessarily the one path to building self-worth. It's just one small thing that people can do, but you don't have to do. But you lose so much trust in yourself when you're in an abusive relationship. And I think that's so key because, yeah, you lose it in other people, but you lose it in yourself. And then your nervous system gets really conditioned, right? Rejection is danger. So authenticity, being yourself and showing this self-worth, it's actually terrifying. So again, I don't ever want to make it sound like just, fake it till you make it. And you do need to build it, but you need to be regulating your nervous system at the same time of making tiny choices every day that build your self-worth. Inside Rise and Rebuild, my group coaching program, we go into a lot of detail. So over 12 weeks, we cover self-kindness, self-worth, self-esteem, how to reframe and refocus when you feel like things are falling apart, how to handle setbacks, how to unpack who you have been and why you've been that way. And then what are the actionable steps to build this new version of you that has self-worth, that feels love for yourself, that knows your values and your boundaries and feels deserving to hold them. And you aren't afraid of rejection or abandonment anymore. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, which I actually just want to sort of use this time to say, this is what change looks like. Long, hard work, relentless work, reading, watching videos, taking courses, going to therapy, really focusing on it, practicing it every single day. And it takes years. Just like not being abusive anymore would take that same level of commitment and work. So if you're in that relationship still and you're hoping they change, that's what it would look like. Constant changed behavior, daily practice, thinking about it all the time, reading, watching videos, going to therapy, unpacking all of your belief systems. It is a lot of work. And that is a huge reason why they often do not change. Almost ever, they do not change. To reclaim your worth, right? It is so hard to do, but you have to stop negotiating it. If you say like, I don't want that, and somebody's like, but here's why you should, I'm not even going to participate in that conversation because I said what I said, right? It's not a matter of not listening to people, but if somebody is trying to negotiate something that goes against something that is within your core values and you do not want to do it, or you do want to do it. I was talking to a client the other day about wanting to bake cookies for a neighbor. And he was like, what the? I'm like, convinced her not to. That goes against her core values of being helpful, kind, giving, compassionate person. But to convince her not to do it by like shame and frankly like ridicule, that goes against. So that's an example of like, what your worth is, what you do, what you stand for. But we ask, in an abusive relationship, we ask somebody who is essentially harming us, right, to appraise our value in a way, to confirm our value. And it's madness, but we do it because we get so attached. Trust and dependency is built so early in these abusive relationships. And then it just doesn't break easily. When you're in a trauma bond, even if you're coming out of a trauma bond, we're just so conditioned to behave this way and check with them and check their value and check our value with them. And just, it's madness. We don't have to feel worthy every second of the day, but you act like someone who is, and this is, fascinating. I've always felt like, again, you're not going to learn this in books because it is in the practice. Like courage isn't built by reading a book about courage or watching a YouTube video about courage. It's actually built through the action, the daily practice of what does that look like? Well, courage is doing things when you're afraid and you're still going to do it. You're nervous, you're anxious, you're unsure, but there's something in you that feels like this is the right thing. Do it. That's where it's built. If you think about, let's use like a really like childlike example of like, my daughter wanted to go down a slide. Like she was 6 years old, huge slide, but she's nervous. She's terrified. And so she's like, I'm not ready. I'm not, and I said, well, here's the thing. Like, you're not going to get ready just by standing at the top of the slide looking down. The way you learn if you can do it or not is to do it. And you go down that slide and you're not hurt and you had so much fun. Now you're like, oh, there it is. I love this. And then you get to go down the slide many times. She did it. And I said to her, you just built courage. I know we're just talking about a kid and a slide, but that's the thing. We want to be ready to leave before we leave. Well, sometimes you have to leave when you feel so unsure, because that's what builds the courage. You've done it. Build the courage to say, no, I will not do that extra project. No, I will not be treated this way. Build the courage to say, this is what I want. This is who I am. By doing that and saying it out loud and putting those actions into practice every day. If you feel like you entered this relationship with no self-worth, low self-worth, high self-worth, where are you now? How has it been destroyed in that relationship? And what actions are you taking to actually rebuild it? Are you in therapy working through this, or working with a coach such as me or whomever, working through this and actually building the steps and the tools every single day? This is literally the reason that I created Rise and Rebuild, which is a play on my book, Rebuilding After a Trauma Bond, a self-love journal. It follows a very similar framework. So the book is on Amazon. You can grab that. The program is in the link in my profile. So please check that out. I co-host it with Dr. Peter Salerno. It's 12 weeks, 75 minutes each. It's affordable. It has payment plans even. But this is a huge decision that we make to take our healing so seriously, so that you don't get into another abusive relationship, so that you live a life that is literally you, authentically you. People talk about that, but how, right? So this is an amazing thing for people to really get into and learn how to build it. So I hope that the book recommendations have helped, and anything I've said today helps. And, if you're not already following me, please do that. I talk with people about exiting abusive relationships, breaking trauma bonds, confidence, rebuilding self-worth, self-love, and really just rebuilding yourself after you've been in an abusive relationship, or getting out of an abusive relationship as well. Also talk to people about co-parenting issues and all kinds of things, but you can find more about me at strongerthanbefore.ca. But I really appreciate everybody for listening today, and I hope that it has helped you in any way build self-worth. Thank you so much for being here, and I will catch you at the next one.